I'm Tiffany Hall. I'm the Executive Director of Recover Alaska. This is one of my favorite events all year. September is National Recovery Month, and it is a time for us to honor and lift up people who are in recovery, who have made that choice and are putting in the work every day to make their lives better and to make the lives better of everyone around them. I'm a person in long-term recovery myself, and I know that most of the time we are kind of relegated to church basements and dark rooms, and we're told to remain anonymous and that we should feel really ashamed about our alcohol use disorders. And I don't think that's right, I don't think that's true, and so I'm so grateful to be able to work at an organization that gets to dispel that and to change that narrative. So without further ado, that's what we're gonna do here tonight. So I'd like to please welcome and please join me in welcoming these super courageous storytellers tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Wow, this is amazing. My name is Wesley Brewington. I'm a person in long-term recovery. What that looks like is I haven't found it necessary to use a mood or a mind-altering substance in 6 years. My sobriety date is 2/6/2013. And you guys are stuck with me as your host tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Amy, who's going to do some drumming for us. And just to start us off, Amy, and you can learn more about her in your program. If you want to read about me, I'm in the program too. But Amy's, you can find out more about Amy from ancientwild.com, and she's going to come give us some drumming.
I'm Amy. Welcome. I can't not tell this story. I drum and I storytell, and I can't not do it without mentioning a very special person in my life who was my mentor, my drumming and storytelling mentor, by the name of Michael Mead. He taught me this story. I was in my early 20s, but what he also taught me was that stories will tell you the right time to tell them. And so when I started working with Recovery Alaska, and we decided to make this, the drumming and storytelling, a part of the program this year, I thought, that is a damn good story for people that are in recovery, or really people that are just struggling with anything. So that's what I'm going to present to you tonight. It's an ancient Indian story, and it's called Facing Death. So. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Once upon a time,
So this next person I want to introduce to the stage plays a huge part in my recovery. And when I was in treatment, I did 14 months at Nugent's Ranch, where I learned how to live life on life's terms. And this person used to come to Nugent's Ranch and share his story. And before he came, it was a bunch of older guys, and they was always like, get sober, you could be like me. And I just really couldn't see anything in them that I wanted. And until this guy showed up, right? He was like a savior, right? He like showed up, and he, I seen a little something in him that, he's somebody I look up to in recovery. He has 4 years clean and sober, and he plays a huge part in the recovery community in the Valley. And he hails from Wasilla, Leonard. Thank you.
How often you guys look around and wonder, what would it be like if we were all messed up right now? I mean, like, seriously. So yeah, I'm first in long-time recovery. That means I haven't had a substance in my body that affected me from the neck up since beginning November 1st, 2014. For that, I'm very, very grateful. It started before I started using substances, though. I'd come home from school, and I'd see my dad highly intoxicated. I always had a thought that he'd just start drinking. Is he drunk, or is he sober? And honestly, the one that gave me the most amount of comfort is, did he just start drinking? Because he did silly things like give me lots of money and let me hitchhike across town. If he was drunk, he wasn't a nice person. If he was sober, he really wasn't a nice person, and he was coherent. So that was even a little worse, quite honestly. But I was confused because when I started drinking, watching the way my dad would handle himself. When I first started drinking, I was like, that's not what my dad had going on, because he was not a nice person. But this is something this is good. What I got going on is a good thing. I was a part of something, man. In high school, I chased that, and I gained some popularity. I drank as much as I could, as often as I could. When I graduated high school, I was lucky enough to get engaged to a woman who was 5 years older than me. If you do the math, that's a very good number, by about 2 years. She was willing to buy me alcohol. She bought me alcohol a lot. I drank every single day for about 4 years, and then I made a decision I'm not going to be like my dad. I quit drinking, and then I started drinking again. And when I started drinking again, and I tried to quit after that, I couldn't, and I was again confused. How was I able to put my foot down this one time and stop drinking, and now I can't? And then my mom passed away, and then I had all the excuse I needed to not even worry about it. I'm going to drink all I want. Law got involved. I had this judge saying, you're not going to drink anymore. I didn't drink after that. But then my dad passed away, and I decided to really kind of see what alcoholism is all about, so I started treating it with other substances. Shortly after that, very shortly after that, my wife had an aneurysm and her brain rupture. It affected her profoundly. Tremendous change in who she was, how she behaved, how she was. Another excuse for me to start really, really diving into those substances. Shortly after that, her mom, my mother-in-law, committed suicide. This is a perfect reason for me to do what I know to do best, which is treat what's going on in here with substances and stay away from all you guys. But the thing is, I didn't have any criminal problems, but my jail was that corner over there being scared and not good enough. Couldn't show myself in the community. I couldn't show myself for who I was. Couldn't be the person that I knew I was capable of being in any way. So really I needed an intervention, and it looked a lot like, dude, I don't know what you are, but you're helping these people, I need your help. And I got clean and sober, Shortly after that I had my teeth extracted. And if you guys ever had your teeth extracted, they give you some pretty cool stuff. I really like pretty cool stuff. You give me some pretty cool stuff, I'm gonna use a lot of it. So I was using it as prescribed until I wasn't, and it happened that fast. But in that experience, I was able to get back on track. I said another little prayer. I said, "Hey, dude, whatever it was, just forgive me. Let me get back on track," and I did. And here I am today, a person in recovery. I've had a road of do it wrong, keep trying, and here I am today, coming up on 5 years of sobriety. In the end of my drinking, it was like this. I would wake up and I would get at the edge of my bed, and I'd average about 18 beers a night. I'd get on the edge of my bed when I woke up. I'd stretch my chest out like this with a 4-ounce glass of vodka, and I'd sip it back and I'd let this calm down. Some of you guys can relate to that. My body needed to feel what that alcohol could do for it. And then once it did, now I get this I want to keep drinking thing going on, So I had to make this decision. Am I going to keep drinking, or am I going to do something productive that day, like, go to the store, put gas in my car, feed my dog? These are the kinds of decisions I was really faced with. And today, I haven't had to make that decision in such a long time. And I mean, it was a perilous decision. It was really something that grabbed me when I woke up. I don't think I can stress that enough. I wake up fearful of, do I have enough substance in my house? And this is how I lived my life day after day after day. And today, I'm living my life looking for, what can I do? How can I be a part of something like this? How can I share that there's hope? How can I share what my friend Wes helped to coin, we do recover? It's not like we can recover, it's not like there is recovery, we do recover. We come together in events like this with these people behind me to support me and to share their recovery stories for you guys who might be struggling, and to let you know that there's hope, Lots of opportunity, we're out there, all you gotta do is seek us, be a part of what we're doing. And I feel weird, I wanna jump around, I'm not kidding, I wanna but I'm not going to, because that's about it. But I mean, I'm excited about what recovery is, and something like this gets me more excited. My wife passed away about 2 years ago, and in the wake of that, I passed by the place where I had relapsed with alcohol the last time, and I remembered sitting on the side of the road, literally hoping to get hit by a truck. And I walked by that after my car had crapped out, so seemingly things are really going bad. But I'm in recovery, and I'm solid in my recovery, and I was okay. I got through that experience really well. I had a fellowship of people that support me. I have recovery events like this that I do to try and share a message of hope, and I was able to get through that. Through that whole instance with her injury and the recovery from that, my helping her, taking care of her and stuff. I was exposed to the professional staff at the hospital, and as you guys see in the program, I had this opportunity to become a medical social worker. Well, that started with, what the hell, I'm gonna see if I can get some college under my belt. And here I am today, doing something that's just phenomenal. And it wasn't my idea, it wasn't something I thought possible. I wanted to just stay sober tonight, when I first got sober. I really did. I wanted to wake up tomorrow without a hangover. I wanted to be able to keep some food down, not puke when I brush my teeth. That's the kind of stuff I would tell Wes when I went to the ranch. Because that's the kind of stuff that got me, Here's this dude, when I first went in recovery, he was like 30-some years old. He was bouncing all over the stage, talking about how good it is to be sober. I related to that, So any of you guys who are struggling tonight, take a look around. As Wes had you guys raise your hands, there's a lot of recovery in this room, there's a lot of fellowship, there's a lot of power in this room. So thank you guys for being a part of this. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Matt Leonard. So we have 8 speakers tonight, and I'm pretty sure there's only 2 from Anchorage. So this next lady is from Nikolai, and that's in the Upper Kuskokwim area. I don't know where that's at, but I'd like to go there. She has 11 years clean, so I think that makes her an old timer. How much time do you have to be an old timer? 15 or something? Maybe she's not an old timer. She has 11 years clean. She's a proud Alaska Native woman. And when I heard her earlier, we did rehearsals earlier today, and the pride she has for her community and her people. She's a proud Alaska Native woman, and she supports traditional healing in her community, and she's giving back to her community today. So help me welcome Shirley.
I got sober in Providence Hospital. I was dying from alcohol withdrawals and a rare blood infection and a bladder infection. And I barely remember being there. I know I was really sick, and I remember my friend Dale and my daughter were taking me to the hospital, and I kind of remember just a little bit, and I woke up and I heard the doctor saying that if she makes it through the night, she might have a 50-50 chance of living. And even then, she might not ever be able to talk again or remember who anybody is. And that's how sick I was. And that first year of being sober, I think it was the biggest test for me. Because I credit God for delivering me from alcoholism. There was nothing that I could have done to stop myself from drinking. That was my whole being, was to be the alcoholic that I became. And so that first year, my daughter was pregnant with my first granddaughter. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and I relied totally on God for everything that year. I remember I kept praying, Lord, I need to help take care of my family, and I don't have anything. So I prayed every day. I prayed that I could find a job, and finally I just said, I'm going to give it all to you, because I'm unemployed yet, and I need to take care of my family. And so I said, since you can't help me get a job, so send me money. And so that week and the couple of weeks after that was the most amazing time that I seen God work, answering that prayer that I prayed for money. I was getting checks in the mail I had like 3 checks I didn't even apply for permanent fund that they sent back to me during that week. And then for years, because of my drinking, I lost custody of my kids, and child support was even sending me money, and it was amazing. I just knew then that, that God has got everything under control. And he was saying, I'm from Nikolai, and I don't know if very many people know where that's at, but there's 80 people maybe that live there year-round. It's a small village, and maybe it's about 50%. The alcoholism is like half now. It used to be 80%. And anyway, my dad passed away in 2017. All those things that I used to be really afraid of, that I thought I was going to start drinking again, I was carried through all of those things. And I guess just today, I just feel like I need to start sharing about what alcoholism took away from me and the life that I have now. And it's totally different. I have my mom still. My dad passed away, and so she's got like 30 years of sobriety, and she's my biggest fan. And so every day I count my blessings, and I have a grandson, a brand new grandson, that when I look at him, I just know that he's never going to have to see me. Hopefully, pray that he never sees me with a hangover or hearing about me doing crazy things like I used to. So I've been working, trying to help people for the past 10 and a half years or so. I help people to try to get into recovery programs. A lot of people get ordered to do things, to go to treatment and stuff. So, I set up anger management classes or AA classes as part of my job. And so I'm trying to do the best I can to give back. Thank you.
Thank you. What a testament to God is doing for me what I cannot do for myself. Thank you for sharing your story. Just a disclaimer that, you know, we're sharing stories up here, and I know it can get emotional, and some might be triggered and may need to exit, but there are people in the lobby to speak with if that happens. I mean, I do hope you come back. You know, we're sharing experience, strength, and hope up here, and you know, the mess is a part of the message, and you know, we have to share that part. It's what made all of us who we are today. So our next speaker is from Soldotna and has 14 months clean and sober. I mean, you hear a lot up here about AA and different pathways to recovery, and you can go to shameless plug recoveralaska.org and find out more about paths to recovery and roads to recovery. There are 19 nationally recognized roads to recovery. It's not just AA, and you've heard a little bit about cultural pathways to recovery, faith-based pathways to recovery. So yes, I'd like to introduce Shawn, who has 14 months clean and sober from Soldotna. He has 2 kids, and he loves fishing and being outdoors. Help me welcome Shawn.
Thank you for all coming this evening. Last year, at about a month after my 50th birthday, while sitting in the ER emergency room in the hospital in Soldotna again, I decided that I did not want to die under the influence of alcohol or an alcohol-related death. I just didn't want to leave that mess for my children and loved ones and for myself. I had finally had enough. I was given a chance to go to a new detox center down there. I spent a week in that. After that, I went to a Serenity House, in-house treatment, and I was there for a couple months. It's there that I learned some tools to deal with my problems, being alcohol, and I learned that since age 12, I had been using alcohol and or some drugs with it to not deal with my emotions, from just all my emotions. And they taught me, they introduced me to a program, and where I learned that although I did have a deep belief in God, I was not living my life in a godly manner. I was just living it with the belief. So I made a decision to turn my life and my will over to the hands of God. And my life started to change. I found out that I did not need alcohol to deal with all these things that I thought were impossible to deal with. I learned that I had extreme problems with anxiety and depression. I've since learned just by turning everything over to God that I could deal with life on life's terms. And since doing so, my life has changed dramatically. When I went in there, I was on crutches, in a full leg cast, and a clamshell looking brace, because I had broken leg, broken back, broken heart, broken spirit. I was disconnected from everything. I learned how to become reconnected to God, and I learned the difference between being spiritual and religion, and I was able to combine them both for myself. And I learned that for the first time in my life, after working through all these problems that I had, that I was at peace for the first time in my entire life. It took me that long. I had people in my life, plenty of people that had given up on me. My alcoholism it was beyond belief. I ruined basically every relationship I ever had with anybody, except for my daughter. My 22-year-old daughter at the time, she's 23 now, never gave up hope on me. She never enabled me, and trust me, I tried, but she never did. But she was always there. She was the only person to ever visit me in jail, ever visited me in the hospital. She participated on family days at the treatment center, and she is still in my life today. She's in the audience. She drove me up here. And our relationship is beyond what I ever imagined it would be. And today I have a huge newfound relationship with the God of my understanding. I'm an active member in my community now, in the recovery community. I just decided to do this, to come and talk at this event, basically for people not to give up hope on that one person, that one loved one, friend, sibling, parent, child, because I am actual proof that a person can change their life. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. Let me ask a question. How many people in this room believe in second chances? So without those chances, I know I wouldn't be here. I had way more than 2 chances, maybe like 22 chances. But somebody didn't give up on me, and somebody had faith in me. Somebody believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Somebody was there for me. And so this next person I'm going to ask to come up and speak, she's from Alaska, and she got sober when she was young. And they say that active alcoholism is isolation and recovery is connection. And for her to get that at such a young age, sometimes it takes us to go through a lot of things before we get it. And I see people keep coming back. And so for her to get it as young as she did when she was 17, she is the proof that we can recover at an early age. So help me introduce Alex.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Ellis, and I identify as a person in long-term recovery. And I got sober of July of 2014, and it was definitely not an easy road to get to where I am today, but my life is really, really good today, and in a lot of ways I have no idea how I got like this, except that, like Matt said and many other people said, that there was people that came before me that laid out the path, and all I had to do was follow and then change absolutely everything. So I grew up in Anchorage, and to a really nice family. My dad is a lawyer and my mom's an accountant, and there's three of us, 3 kids. I'm the youngest of 3. I'm the only girl, which means I was insanely spoiled. But like I just felt like from a very young age, like I was like an astronaut without a tether. Like I just lived in my own little world, and I felt lonely and isolated, and like was always vibing for somebody's attention, whether it was in school or it was from my brothers or it was from my parents. There was just always something missing. And when I got older, by the time I was 8, I had my first thoughts of suicide, because it was just like, oh gosh, this life, it just can't be like this. And by the time I was 12, I had my first drink of alcohol. It was Kirkland tequila, and I just remember feeling when I drank it, and my friends were there too, that they didn't feel the way that I did. And for me, it felt like connection. It felt like, oh my gosh, this has been missing my entire life. I can now talk to people, have a conversation. It was like that tether, and it brought me right back down to earth, and I could have a conversation. And that accelerated really quickly, and I started to live a double life. And for me, I always like to say that my drinking and my using was a sprint, not a marathon. And for me, the big thing was, like, I'm so young. Like, there's no way that I can be an alcoholic or an addict. Like, first time I went to treatment, I was 16. I just thought, there's no way. And then what happened for me is the treatment center that I went to was a long-term facility out in Eagle River, and they taught me some tools, and they told me things like, if you stop drinking and you pick back up, you'll start back right where you left off. And I was like, there's no way. That's not going to apply to me. I'm special. But it was true. And I couldn't believe it. And for me, what happened was really fast. I got out of treatment. I went back to Service High School, where I was now that weird girl who went to residential treatment at 16. Or that's the story I told myself, right? And it went really fast. And one night, July 18th of 2014, I decided to throw a party at my parents' house while they were out of town. And the next morning, I drove my friend home, and I was backing out, and all I can remember is just this necklace in the mirror of my truck just swinging back and forth, and then the sound of the bicyclist hitting my car, and then the police at the house, and me telling the police that it was me, I was the one that did it, I left, and I'm the one that hit that man. And I don't know why this happened, but the police officer said, don't say anything else. And we did a field sobriety test, and he sat me down on the bench there, and he called my parents, who were just beside themselves. And he got a phone call, and the person on the phone told him that the man that I'd hit had died. I'd killed him because of my actions that day. And it was like every sense of self that I had just evaporated, and all I could do was just pray that there would be peace for all the people out there that were suffering because of me. And what happened next was a series of really weird events that I'm still today not sure how to properly describe. My parents came in from Willow. The police didn't arrest me. I got brought to Providence Hospital, Discovery Unit, where I made a decision. I was like, okay, I could either kill myself because it really feels like the better option. Maybe like a lot of people would be happy that I'm dead. Or I can try to live every single day as an amends for what I've done. And I chose the latter path. And it was not the easy way. Honestly, jail probably would have been a lot easier. Jail, you just get to hang out and like people and lay in bed and whatever. Like, I went back to treatment. I was court ordered to go to treatment again, and I had to sit in front of a group of people every week, and they told me all my character defects, and I had to look at what I had done and who I'd become and the events that had got me to there. And it was no longer like, you're 17 years old, like there's no way that you can be an alcoholic. It was like, you're 17 years old, and if you don't get sober, then I don't know. And so it became a way of life for me. It really felt like nobody else wanted to get sober in the facility, and they gave me the opportunity to try things that I really hadn't given myself a chance to try. And it was like I was in a bubble. So like, people will ask me about the court stuff, and like, I mean, I don't know, because I just did it. Like, people told me to do stuff, and I was like, yep, I'm done, I'm doing it. Like, I obviously have no control over my own actions, and I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do. And so I graduated high school, and I didn't have a lot of connection with my family after the accident. And so when I graduated high school, I hadn't talked to my dad for 6 months. And when I walked down like the one hallway at the treatment center, my dad was there. And I had a very similar experience when I graduated college this year. A crowd full of people walked out. My dad was right there. And having that connection back in my life by just doing some simple things, like changing everything, going to meetings, being of service, like somewhere like here, where I'm scared to death of what people think about me, you know? And the truth is, it's none of my business. So, thank you.
Our next storyteller was up here earlier. She started, since she's going to start after the intermission, so she's not going to drum, she's going to tell her story. And Amy has been sober for 4 years? 4 years, and she's from Girdwood, so I was thinking in the back, like, if you get sober in Girdwood, you can get sober anywhere, so she is the evidence that it doesn't matter. You can help me welcome Amy.
I did get sober and stay sober in Girdwood, so hey. I'm taking a little bit different of an approach with my story. I'm going to tell 3 mini stories, and it was 3 very distinct times in my drinking career that people had said something to me that made an impact and transformed the way that I felt about my drinking when it was actually very out of control. So the first story for me started in Brooklyn, New York. I was living above an Italian bakery there with a lovely Greek man, who I'm still friends with. We salvaged that. And he was a real estate broker, so he was gone a lot at night. And I would get off work at my job, and I would slip over to another Italian restaurant. I'm not Italian, but the Italian restaurant next door, and started drinking beer, just 1 or 2 after I got off work, right? Which I think is how sometimes problems starts, loneliness coupled with drinking. And then it kind of just escalated from there, and I found myself taking the train a lot up to the East Village, because it felt like my drinking was escalating and I didn't want people to see me. And I don't know if you know anything about the population of Brooklyn, but I certainly was just another face in the crowd. Could have drank there with anonymity, like no problem, but there was something that transformed in my mind to where it had to become sneaking. So I had to get the furthest away. So I would go to the outskirts of the city, and I would sit at this Spanish restaurant, and I would drink. And I made friends with the bartender, like so many people do, and that became that became my second home for a while. One of the nights I sat there, it was a very hot night, and I was propped on the bar stool with my cute wedge sandals, and I drank way too much. And I slid off the bar stool, and I remember trying to get my bearings in my shoes even, right? Because my heels were a little bit high. And so, but I proceeded out. I went out into the streets of New York City. It was, and I proceeded to go to the subway. And I had a big messenger bag with me at the time. and it was hot. And New York City in the summer is disgusting. It's so hot and gross and disgusting that the sweet, sweet margaritas only made that worse. So I got on the train, and I remember I was the only one in that particular car, and we went through the tunnel, and it was like joosh, joosh, like the lights just going by. And then I started getting the spins, and then I started getting sick. And so I opened up my messenger bag, and I puked in it, just all over, just filled it. Got off, and the next stop was actually my destination, conveniently, so I got off there. Went ahead and just took the sandals off, like didn't bother wearing shoes for the next 10 blocks, which downtown Brooklyn is pretty disgusting. I mean, talk about some high-risk behavior. Carried my bag, walked in the door, and I set my stuff down downstairs, and I walked up, and he was sitting at the kitchen table there. And I wanted desperately for him to act out the hatred that I felt for myself in that moment. I desperately wanted somebody to please hate me as much as I hated me. I needed that to happen. So I did what I always did, and I picked a fight with him. And in his very soft, sweet Greek accent, he looked me in the eye and he said, "You are not the same person you were when you moved to New York City. Your drinking has made you different." End of the first story. The second story, I had taken a job managing a cruise ship, which is a great job if you want to live the lifestyle of somebody that drinks, because everyone's doing it all the time. Because I was in management, we refrained most of the time from those behaviors, so I would be out on the river, cruising around for up to, 6 to 8 weeks at a time. I would go on small, what I would call benders on my breaks, like if we got like a half a day off, we would get some friends and we would go out. But the intention and the drive actually was always to pound alcohol. Like there was a lot of pent up energy, and that was the way that we were going to solve these problems, was to just completely get hammered. And so that's what we did on our breaks. One particular time I went on a 6-week, I was out for 6 weeks, and I had come home, and I decided that I wanted to stay with my sister. My mother at the time was sick of my shit, and she was tired of me coming over and tired of me draining the alcohol cabinets while I was there. And so I stayed at my sister's with my, at the time, just my one nephew, whom I loved dearly. And I was playing with him and drinking wine and getting my buzz on and strategizing in my mind on how I could actually steal bottles of wine from my brother-in-law, who never purchased, it wasn't Behringer, let's say that. It was a very expensive bottles from places. And in my mind, playing with my nephew, strategizing how I was going to steal alcohol after everyone went to bed. So everyone went to bed that night. I successfully snuck downstairs, stole 3 bottles of wine, sat in my room, and I pounded all 3 bottles of wine. Somebody that's that out of control with their drinking, I feel like, is constantly leaving warning signs of self-sabotage everywhere that are screaming, "I cannot stop myself, can somebody help me stop?" So I left the wine bottles in my room on blatant display for my sister to find. I left the next morning, and once again I wanted somebody to be as pissed off at me as I was at me, and I got an email from my sister, and she said, "Amy, we love you and we want for your well-being." At a time that I did not have the tools to love myself, I didn't grow up in that type of environment. I didn't have the tools to love myself. I didn't have the courage to love myself, and I didn't have the courage to even try. I didn't know that existed for me in the world. And that was the second thing that happened. The third thing that happened was the last time I drank, and that was in 2015. I was staying with a friend and her children, and this was after my cruise ship job had ended, and I was living with my friend and my best friend from 4th grade, right? And she I wasn't working at the time and just traveling and having the time of my life, right? And was staying with her. And during the day, I was just hanging out at the pool. And I would start drinking wine at, I don't know, 10 a.m. Like that sounded fine to me. I didn't have anywhere to be. Didn't matter, right? So she approached me one day as well, and she said, we can't just have you here like hanging out at the pool and drinking wine all the time. Yeah, I kind of understood it. Her kids were in elementary school. So then I started sneaking wine. I started sneaking the little bottles, and I just thought, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna carry the shit in my backpack, like nobody's ever gonna know. And that's when things really kind of went downhill for me, was when I was at that level of dishonesty with myself and with the people that were around me. So one particular morning I woke up and I was very, very, very sick from alcohol. And I was laying on the bathroom floor, which is where all great stories start, mind you, is on that bathroom floor. I remember laying there thinking that my soul had been dumped and wrung and dumped and wrung and dumped and wrung so many times, and I just wanted to be in the sun. I just wanted to be hung out to dry. And there was a light that was coming in from underneath the bathroom door, from the skylight in the living room, and I just thought to myself, you know, if I could just get the fuck up and follow this light, like, we would just be good, right? Like, just follow the light. Like Joseph Campbell said, like, who doesn't, you know, follow the light? It's such a metaphor. But it really was something that transformed me. I decided at that time, because really that was the only option that I knew, was to go to an AA meeting. I did get up off the bathroom floor, mind you, and I did. I went to an AA meeting, and there was a man there, and he came up to me after the meeting, and he said, honey, like, your disease is waiting for you out in the parking lot, and it's doing push-ups and like this whole thing. And I thought, like, I don't need to be more afraid of the life that I'm living, and I certainly don't need to be afraid of this thing that's inside of me. I need to love it. And that's what I've done since December 14th, 2019. Thank you.
One more time for Amy and Girdwood. So our next storyteller, all the way from Bethel, Alaska. Wait, no. So from Bethel, Alaska. He has a year and a half clean. He has 2 kids, and he's a huge part of the recovery community. And his name is Nikolai. So help me welcome Nikolai to the stage.
Thank you. So when I was growing up, I'd watch my grandfather drinking, and I just never knew which grandfather I would get every time I saw him, because sometimes he would be the sweetest, most loving and caring person, and other times he would be just angry and scary. And so I never trusted my grandfather, and I could remember distinctly thinking that I'll never be the alcoholic that my grandfather is. And as I was growing up, I realized that I was different from the other boys that I was growing up with. I realized that I had a lot of, I was attracted to both males and females. And so that set me apart from all my other peers. And I realized that was wrong. That was something that was, looked down at in my community. And I began hating myself. And I had a horribly low self-esteem, and I felt like I didn't deserve anything good because of how I was. And so I spent a lot of years repressing those feelings and trying to pray to God to take them away, because I wanted that normal life. And when I was in high school, I had my first taste of alcohol at a school dance, and it was horrible alcohol, but the effect that it had on me was it gave me a sense of freedom, that sense of connection that I heard of earlier. And all those voices that told me that I wasn't good enough disappeared. And for a couple of moments in my life, I was able to have fun. And right then I knew that this stuff was amazing. And as time went on, I had this dream of myself that I would be one of those guys that had beer in the fridge and a liquor cabinet in his kitchen. And I would go home at the end of the day, have a few beers or have a few drinks, and life would be amazing. I was excited to try all the different kinds of alcohol. So as time went on, I got married, I had a couple kids. I had a house, 2 vehicles in the driveway. I had some good jobs, but my drinking became worse because I was always thinking, if only I would get to a certain point, I'm gonna be happy. And I would start drinking and I would wake up with hangovers. And I tried different ways of drinking and none of them ever worked because I had to get to that one point and everything would be okay. And I would be the exception. I'm not the alcoholic. I have 2 vehicles in my driveway. I have a house, I have a wife, I have kids. I can't be an alcoholic. And fast forward to a few years ago, I lost everything. I lost everything. My wife, custody of my kids, the house, my vehicle, everything. I was homeless and I couldn't keep a job. I was always drinking in excess and hungover. And so I couldn't keep a job at all. And it got to the point where I lost my younger brother to drunk driving. He was driving a snow machine and got into an accident. I had to go and identify his body and then go and tell my parents that their son was dead. So all of these different traumas affected me, and I didn't know how to cope with those feelings. And I always went to alcohol because as long as I kept drinking, I didn't have to think about all those different things. I was only hurting myself. I wasn't hurting anyone else. That's the lie that I kept telling myself. And this one morning after what I thought was just a one-day binge, which it was 3 days and I had no recollection of the day in between, I had this moment where I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I was thinking, like, what am I doing to myself? And I was dry heaving into the toilet and I audibly said, I don't want to die. And I could still hear that today. And so I went to the treatment center in Bethel and I spoke with a counselor. I was evaluated and they suggested that I go into residential treatment. And I thought of every reason why I shouldn't, but in the end I did. And because I was ready to get healthy. I wanted to be healthy. And in my 3rd day in, when my head finally cleared up and I got over the sweats and the jitters and the anxiety, I sat down and I wrote this letter to myself, which I refer back to every once in a while. I wrote exactly what got me into treatment. I wrote down exactly how I felt that moment. And then I wrote the kind of life that I wanted to have. And while I was in there, there was a clinician that was big into yoga and meditation and grounding meditation. And there was a few times in treatment where I sat down with my counselor and she asked me to close my eyes and imagine the safest place on earth. And for me, that's a beach in Hawaii. And she asked me to imagine myself as a little kid. And this image of myself came to my head where I was wearing my favorite jacket and rubber boots, and it was a spring flood on the Kuskokwim. And I saw this little kid with his toothless grin. And I knelt down and I grabbed him and I said, I love you, everything's gonna be okay. And I felt that same love that I feel for my kids. And I wanted to have that, show that love to myself. And because before that, I didn't know that was even an option. I didn't know that I was allowed to be happy, I was allowed to be healthy. And so that was a turning point. And then as time went on, I worked on my relationship with myself and with others, because I realized that I was codependent. And I relied heavily on things outside of myself to fix me. Because I would pray, God, fix me, fix everything. I don't know how. I would rely on other people to make me feel better, because I didn't know how to do that for myself. So as time went on, I told my story to as many people as I could, because I didn't want to be ashamed anymore. I know that there are a lot of people who are like me, who are different from other normal people. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that there was hope, because if I could do it, then anyone else could. So thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. So our next speaker comes from Cake, Alaska, and she's an Alaska Native artist, and so she has a piece of her work. I think it is Formline. I don't know what that is, but I'm gonna go check it out. It's out in the lobby, and so if you guys want to check that out, you can check out. She's an artist, and she has 27 years clean. She's an OG. And, so she just celebrated 27 years, 9/5. So let's give her a round of applause for that.
I don't know a thing about microphones. My name is Sonya Smith. I'm from Cape, Alaska. I hit my bottom in my hometown. And I remember that. I remember that day like yesterday. It doesn't seem like 27 years, but to me it's like yesterday. And in my own hometown, you wouldn't think things like that would happen. I come from a very large Klink and Haida family, which I'm very, very proud of. I was having a pretty good time. I was lost in DTs. It was a bright sunny morning, and I heard a knock on my door. And when I went to answer it, I was surprised to see my mom. And she was even more surprised that I'd answered. And she asked if she could come in. I let her in. And then we got everything out that had built up over the years. And we were both equally angry. She was angry with what I'd become, and I'd become very angry about what she said I would become. And she said that because it was true. But I never knew that until I reconciled that with myself later on in treatment. And it really took a lot to come to terms that she was actually there to fight for my life. I never saw it that way. She was a very dynamic woman, very, very powerful. And after we had both gotten out all the poison inside, she had offered to help me to go from that shack that had no electricity or running water into detox that would qualify me to go to treatment in Valley General, Monroe, and Washington. And after I made that agreement, she went to work, and we both had done something for each other that helped us to get from point A to point B to point C. And she was a community family services worker, and she was a pro. She was very, very good at what she did. And so after the agreement in the shack, she was getting up to leave, and she asked to give me a hug. And she came over, and when she embraced me, I embraced her back. And I felt this, if you can visualize an empty glass of water filling and refilling, that's what it was like. That was happening on the inside. And I couldn't explain it, but it started to absorb all that blackness, all that darkness, and that pit of shame and hopelessness. And people who have been there know exactly what I'm talking about. And I just want to mention that we are that demographic of people who are just people. But others look at us like there's no hope for us. And when my mother when I had that spiritual experience, that was the first time I ever felt anything like that. Like I actually had a reason to be alive. And when we were letting each other go, I looked at her and I said, "Mom, what was that?" And she said, "That is all of the love that a mother has for her child." And the determination she had was just phenomenal. But she was a mother before anything else, and she always bragged about that. She's not alive anymore. She left us a couple of years ago, very quickly. But I've done a lot of things, and you can't talk about all the things you've done in 27 years in 10 minutes. That's ridiculous. But I want to say that if you know people who suffer from addictions, please talk to them. I'm one of those people who never knew what kind of world was waiting for me. And my family was there, my friends were there, and that's how it has to be. It needs to be like that. It needs to go from personal. We need to personalize those addictions. And I'd also like to recognize that the issue of the missing and murdered Indigenous women is a very serious epidemic here in Alaska. As a community, everybody needs to partake of this. Everybody. We need everybody to do this. In my heart, I needed everybody to bring me back from where I was. That is a hell that only people like us can tell you about. And I just want to give a shout out to my older brother, who is my rock. He's here. He's been with me. He's been by my side. He helps me out all the time. He's pretty much what our parents were. And that's a heck of a burden to carry, because there's 5 more of us. But, and also my very good friend Julia. And this is what I mean. It has to be a community effort. It has to go from individual to friendships to family to community. And I have the best family. Half of Alaska is my family, so I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I'm glad you could be here. Thank you.
What a testimony. What I heard was that we are people too, good people. I've lost a lot of people to this disease of addiction and alcoholism, and that a lot of good people have families. And to personalize addiction, I want to thank you, Sonya, for your efforts and what you're doing in your community, working with teens and giving back to your community and what you're passionate about. So our last but not least, I don't need my notes for this because we went to high school together, and so in high school we used to have this place, they call it the Pit, and it's like where everybody goes and drinks. And every time I used to go out there, I used to see her out there. So you know what I was doing out there. Not going to class. And we drank together, and I never saw her again after that, and for years. And I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder what happened to that girl. Like, she was still somewhere drinking, and I was sober, and I was working out at a gym one day, and she was a personal trainer, and she had turned her whole life around. And I think it's just amazing, like when I see people who I used to use with, and they make it to the other side, because a lot of us don't. And so to see somebody that made it from where I was to where I'm at today, and they're healthy and happy and have a family and kids and is loving and enjoying their life, is just amazing. So last but not least, help me welcome Ashley Wilson.
Addiction, a form of affliction that hangs, looms, and whispers sweet nothings, beckoning me to indulge, to divulge in my darkest urges, splurges that are earned, deserved, rewarded, only they are an expression of feelings hoarded, hidden, forbidden to come forth, unseen and unheard, not a word spoken, a heart hurting, broken, torn and twisted, longing for connection, protection from our own inner demons. And the scheme is to get us weak-minded. Our mind then becomes its enemy, tunnel-visioned, obsessive, possessive of the poison that's killing us, defending and depending on it to give us life. Numb to the smell of death, we spray a little more perfume, pretending we don't know the ending to the story. So I write poetry as a form of expression, to express thank you. But it wasn't always the case. I was an isolated child, and I used books as a form of escapism. I read all the time because it was easier than facing reality. It was easier than acknowledging the trauma and the hurts and the pain. It was depression showing itself at a very young age. And escapism changed to drugs and alcohol as a teen. That led me into the arms of a very cruel and abusive young man. And through that cruelty and abuse, my addiction had become so unmanageable. I knew I needed a change. My life could no longer go on the way that it was. And I decided to give a church a try called New Direction. I would show up with my hoodie pulled low, arms crossed in the back, hiding. And by the end of the service, I'd be in the front, weeping, and just knowing that this is what I needed. This is what would change me. This is what would fix all the brokenness that I had in my life. I thought from here on out, it's gonna be rainbows and butterflies and kittens after I decided to give my life to Jesus in 2003. And it wasn't. Oh man, I didn't change my environment. I didn't change my friends. Nothing around me changed except for the fact that I knew I was an addict and that Jesus was real. And so, of course, my addiction still remained. I still was involved with the same crowd of people, and it became unmanageable again. And I realized I needed to fully commit to this Jesus thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna do it. And in 2004, I said, all right, everybody get out of my house. And I decided to become a full-fledged Jesus person. And I changed my friends, I changed my community, I changed the people that I was around, and I met my husband. Hey! So that was my first taste of sobriety. And I had little bouts here and there throughout that time. We got married in 2006 and became homeowners, and we became homebrewers. That means we brewed our own alcohol readily available to us. I didn't think that I had a problem. I was saved, healed, whatever, from alcohol. And we slowly started introducing it, and then I became a mom. And then we lost a child in between 2 kids, and I had postpartum depression, pretty hardcore. And my second was born, and postpartum depression was full-fledged, and she was a very difficult child after she was born. Suicidal thoughts and escapism was something I was super familiar with, and since alcohol was socially acceptable, even in Christian circles, I decided I'm going to continue to drink. But I was hiding and lying and not willing and wanting to deal with what actually got me to the bottle every single time. I met my brother for the first time in 2015, which was an awesome experience. It was incredible. But I wasn't really ready or willing to deal with what it would bring up, and the pains and the hurts and the rejection. And when I came back from that trip to North Carolina, something inside me snapped. My drinking ramped up and it accelerated. And through that, I realized that my life had become unmanageable. I was compromising the safety of my children. And God had told me, December 29th of 2015, if you don't get your life together, you're going to ruin everything and lose it all. And I took him at his word. I was like, all right, he means business. And so I had to come clean to my husband about how much I was drinking, and to my friends, and to my church family at Heart of the City, where I was in leadership. And I was so terrified, and I go up to Charity Carmody and I say, your girl's an alcoholic. She was like, okay, I love you. And that following Sunday, she introduced me to a young lady who was drinking, and she said, I want you to talk to her. And I'm detoxing, guys. Like, what? Who am I to talk to her? That's ridiculous. And she goes, who better to talk to her than you? In that relationship, I needed more than, it was a mutual give and take. And through that, I realized sharing my story is a way that I can not be ashamed anymore. Actually remaining in the present, because when we're in full-fledged addiction, we are dwelling in the past or we're tripping about the future, and we're not able to deal with and look at what's happening in the now. And so through this process of recovery and sharing my story with others and being open about it, I'm also learning to deal with the things that have kept me addicted for so long. And I'm learning how to share and not be ashamed, because through that I have a community of people and brothers and sisters who are fighting this fight with me. And even to this day, I still struggle and I still want that drink, but I know that I will lose it all. I will lose everything. And what I have now is not worth it to me. And I didn't start living my life until I became sober. That's when it was like an aha moment. And that's when I realized I could have happiness and joy and actually not have to be stuck in that lifestyle of chaos and regrets and pain. So I thank you today for allowing me to be present with you here.
From the pit to the promise, give it up for Ashley one more time. Give it up for Cover Alaska one time. Anchorage Community Theatre, Colby, thank you. Tiffany, thank you. Jess, thank you. All my storytellers. If you need more information on roads to recovery, go to recoveralaska.org. Thank you.